You're listening to the Women Talking About Learning podcast. My name is Andrew Jacobs. Welcome. Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode, the communication one of the Women Talking About Learning podcast. It's ironic that communication comes up this week because last week I got communication badly wrong. Last week I decided to rename one of our guests, Amy Jane Young, in the introduction. Please accept my sincerest apologies, Amy. This week's guests are, hang on while I check my notes, Sarah Ratcliff and Janet Webb. Sarah Ratcliff is passionate about engaging learners to want to learn. An expert in virtual classrooms, she was awarded Learning Professional of the Year Gold in 2020, and she's always happy to chat about learning and helping people maximise their potential. Janet Webb is a freelance learning and OD consultant, and she helps people to understand what's going on psychologically that manifests in helpful or unhelpful behaviour, and she's been doing this personally and professionally since 1992. In this episode, you'll hear how much passion that Sarah and Janet have for communication. This was really fun to record, with IT issues, whining noises, discussion about wine, and all sorts of things. Recorded on International Women's Day this year, 2021. This is Women Talking About Learning. This is Sarah and Janet talking about communication.
Hi Sarah, how are you doing?
Hi Janet, I'm really good, thank you. So this is the first time that we have been introduced, really. I know that we've been involved in a few kind of Twitter conversations here and there, but this is our first real introduction. So I'd love to know just a little bit more about who you are and what you do, and then we can get on with our subject matter for the day.
Okay. So I am Janet Webb. I am an independent consultant. And what do I do? Well, I got into training and development in about 1992, I think it was. And the thing that I really like doing really is helping people who are new into management. That's my main, that's where my passion is, that's where my heart is. So people who, I typically say that people who are good at making widgets and now suddenly they have to manage a team, and so it's helping people make that transition, and I'll typically do that as either mentoring with people one-to-one or working providing training, but the training tends to be I'll probably put an outline together, but then I work the room and see what's going on in the room. So that's the kind of stuff I do. And I've been freelance for coming up for 9 years, which is, that's I sometimes, the reason I think I picked up on the communication thing is because I quite often get involved with people who are doing presentations, and there's something in there about helping people overcome their fears and just get on with it, really. So how about you? Where's your thing?
Oh, so I've been, I suppose, working in training now for over 18 years. It starts initially from my love of horses. So I'm also a qualified riding instructor, which always shocks people a little bit. But one thing that I learned through the work with the horses is that if we want to create a change, we have to first change ourselves, because if we want the horse to do something different, we have to do something different. And that's kind of where it all started. Then I've worked with organisations such as Weight Watchers and Summers, and which is a whole other conversation. But really, but I started out on the floor, really learning from great people around me. So learning how to kind of own the room, learning how that you could really make a difference to people and individuals. The work I did with Weight Watchers started off initially with my own weight loss journey, and I was fortunate enough to be able to motivate lots of other women to go on and lose weight. And then I realized the whole link between training and motivation and behavior change. And that's really, I suppose, what I'm passionate about. It's how we link and move someone else through our own actions. And so that's kind of what I do. I really like to make a difference. For every one person you can make a difference with, that knocks on to so many others, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And yeah, and so I've now been freelance for not quite 12 months. So actually you've done 9 years and I've probably done about 9 months. So this conversation definitely has to continue after this, Janet, because I've got so much that I can learn from you.
Well, I think we all learn from each other. So that's not me just being, a bit stupid about that. That's the reality of this kind of thing, isn't it? That you meet someone that you've not met before. I can remember, in fact, someone saying years ago, and this has been something that I've held on to for a very long time, and that is a wise person will always learn something from somebody else, even if that other person is stupid. And I'm not saying that you're stupid. That's not what I'm saying. But
it's charming.
No, yes, that's really rude of me. I didn't mean that at all. What I mean is that you meet somebody else, and that's the beauty of communication, which is what we're supposed to be talking about, is that if you are clever and wise and open and listen to the other person, then you will learn heaps. And it's something that I think that people forget, really. They assume that they're any expert in their field assumes, if they're not careful, that the people in the room who aren't experts in that field have nothing to teach. And as soon as you decide that nobody has anything to teach you, then you're scuppered, really, aren't you?
I couldn't agree more. Very well said. And I think one of the things that I love so much about the industry in which we work is that we are all really open about learning, and we're all so curious and thirsty for more learning, which is just what I love about it. And the fact that there's so much sharing that goes on. We want everyone to keep growing and keep developing. And I have to say, it gives me a spring in my step every single day. It really does.
So what is it about communication in particular that you're passionate about or interested in or curious about?
Well, there's so many different avenues we can go down with this today, Janet, and I'm sure that we will. But certainly I think kind of, for one, is the language that we use. Go into what you said before about listening. I think, like you say, I think it's something that is underestimated so frequently. But what really kind of sprung to mind with the communication piece for me is actually, as when we're working with businesses with communication, there are so many channels that we can utilize with the communication channels that are currently in place that can really become a bit of a vehicle for our learning, that can really expand what we're trying to get out there within the business. And I think sometimes it's a stone that's left unturned. What about you?
I suppose there's two things in particular that really attracted me, and when I'm thinking about communication in general. One is people's intent when they're trying to communicate, and I think often people forget to think about that. Forget to think about the outcome that they're after when they're trying to communicate. Forget forget who their audience is, and don't think about who their audience is, and so lose an opportunity to communicate very directly to who that audience is. So there's something in there about people's intentions when they're communicating. But the other thing that really is, this has been quite a long journey for me, and it's about how fear affects the way we communicate, and understanding when we're frightened and the impact that has on people. You were talking about people's behaviour, and we have to change ourselves if we want to change something. And this, I was working with a team a long time ago, and there were 7 of them, and they plucked up the courage to tell me that I was aggressive. And I'm talking a long time ago. And of course, my response to that was not, oh, that's really interesting. Thank you. Tell me a little bit more. It was, what the heck do you mean I'm aggressive? You know, and it really struck me then. And I got sent away to go and learn a bit about aggression and what that is and where that comes from. And so ever since, I've been absolutely fascinated about the way we see the world and the impact that that has on our behavior, and therefore on our communication, how we communicate, the words that we use, the way that we deliver those, the impact that that fear has on us in terms of our intention. So if our fear is making us want to just run away, then our communication will just be very passive or non-existent. Whereas if that fear is making us have so much energy that we have to get our message out and hammer the other person with it, then again the intention is just to belittle the other person or squash the other person. So it's those two things, and I've used this word passion 3 times now, I think. Andrew will tell us whether I've actually said it more than that, but there's something in there about getting to understand, because I know what an impact that had on me, you know, when I understood that I was not communicating in a straightforward way because of the things that I was frightened of. And so I was either being manipulative or getting so worked up that I could then feel that I could shout at someone, neither of which work very well.
Well, I love the story that you've told, Janet, a really powerful story, and actually it's one that really demonstrates that learning through experience, that was kind of somebody held up that mirror to you. So how did you feel when that first happened?
I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated, and I was sat there facing 7 faces all looking at me who had I tell you what it was Belbin interplace. I don't know whether you've come across. So it was a way of giving 360-degree feedback to people. And in those days, and we're talking about the 90s, in those days you got a list of words and you had to tick them against other people. So it wasn't like the 7 of them had ganged up and said, right, we're going to tell Janet this. What had happened is that they all had independently ticked that yes, that I was aggressive. And so there I was with this feedback, and there was no denying it. It wasn't like 6 out of 7 had said, yes, Janet's aggressive. All 7 of them had. They'd also said something very complimentary about me, and I completely dismissed that as not being relevant. And I was just
and we focus on the negative, don't we? But actually I'm sort of feeling here that was a little bit of a turning point for you. What did you do next?
I had a fabulous manager. So I was working in the training team at Selfridges at the time, and I had an absolutely fabulous manager, a lady called Julie Hollingsworth, who found me you know, you can go on an assertiveness course, you know, you can do it online probably, but she actually found me one that really, really dug deep. And it was run by a lady called Dr. Joanna Bisdee. And she'd done a PhD in assertive behaviour. You know, she really knew her stuff. And so I went and did some training with her that really helped me understand the psychology of behaviour, you know, what's going on underneath and how that manifests itself. So that's, and my team, you know, this the reason that they gave me this feedback was because they cared enough about me to tell me, you know, and it was a real turning point in my life, in the way that I behaved, in the way that I viewed stuff that was going on. So yeah, it was a great moment. At the time, it was devastating, though. It was.
I'm sure it was, and actually, sometimes these moments can be quite defining for us, can't they? Because I can really feel the impact of that moment for you. It's really quite powerful, and actually, you gained so much by those people being able to share their feedback, having that open communication with you. has
Absolutely.
created something else.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what was their intention. Their intention was to help me grow.
Yeah.
And it did. It absolutely did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But people aren't always that brave or honest, are they, Janet? To do that. And I think that's quite a blocker in communication. Would you agree that people don't always feel brave enough or take the easy route rather than having that really open, transparent communication that has done what that communication did for you?
Yes, absolutely. I would totally agree with that. And I guess so I've had now 30 years of trying to help other people deal with that.
Yeah.
So how about you? Can you think what is it that started you to think about? I mean, you talked about, working with your horses and stuff, but how did you end up in training? How did you end up where you are now?
Yeah, well, I suppose so. First of all, yes, I did what I did with horses, and then I joined Weight Watchers as a member because I had some weight to lose, and sadly, upon not being with Weight Watchers anymore, I also still have weight to lose. However, during that time, I managed to lose 4 stone.
Oh, wow.
And I remember watching the leader. At that time, I was doing different stuff. I had my horses and I had my job and I did what I did. And I remember watching the leader presenting, because in those days they would help. A Weight Watchers meeting would almost be like a little mini training session, because you would talk about topical issues around weight loss. And I remember looking at her thinking, gosh, I'd love to do that. And so when I'd lost my weight, I was approached and they said, would you like to come and be a Weight Watcher leader? And I was like, yes, absolutely. So off I went to a residential training course, which was actually over the water, because I'm from the Isle of Man.
Oh, wow.
So I had to travel to England for this. So I was like a duck out of water, a fish out of water even. And I remember looking at the trainer who did it and thinking, gosh, that looks brilliant, to be able to inspire and motivate so many people. Anyway, off I went home and became an award-winning leader for Weight Watchers. So I got lots of people to goal, the most in my region. I absolutely had turned around some meetings in the UK and had great success, because by this time I'd moved to England because I'd married an English boy. He brought me
always
over.
A sensible thing to do.
Yeah, so I left my little island. And when the opportunity came to join the Weight Watchers training team, I was like, absolutely, I want to do that. And it gave me the opportunity to really learn from the experience of those people around me. And that was it then, because I realized that I could really make a difference and impact other people's behaviors, not just with losing weight, but those same theories apply to everything that I do. And actually, communication, language, listening, all of those things really play a vital part. So I'm passionate about the language that we use, and I too use the word passion quite a lot, Janet, because but you know what, because it's absolutely what I love to do. When you see a light bulb moment go off in someone, when you see that one person go away and achieve success, it's so powerful, because you know that will trigger on to somebody else, and that's when the magic happens for me.
Absolutely, I could not agree with you more. That thing about, you used the word ripples earlier, and that I remember being in a room full of higher training assistants, so higher level training assistants, that's the word I'm looking for. And they were all experts in special educational needs in different fields. And most of them had got there because their own child had special educational needs. And so they'd gone into the school with their child and had helped, and their child had gone on to secondary school, and they had stayed as a TA, as a training assistant in the school. And so they had this incredible experience and knowledge, and so the head teachers would say, that's great, can you now go and share that with other people? And that they were mostly women, had never been given any skills in presenting, in putting a communication together.
Yeah.
And they were terrified. And it was one of those situations where they had all that knowledge and it needed to be shared. And we needed to find a way of making them feel comfortable to do that. And so I was brought in to help them just overcome their nerves and put communications together effectively and use PowerPoint and all that sort of stuff. But what occurred to me was that if I could get these women to be effective at communicating, so that the other parents that they were talking to or the other teachers that they were talking to then had a better understanding, then that made ripples, and those ripples went on and on and on and on. And it was such a light bulb moment for me, seeing that in them and seeing them leave that room feeling much more confident about what they were about to do, and knowing that they were going to have an impact that would impact children for years and years and years. It was an extraordinary moment. I think we can really underestimate the impact that we can have on somebody, and that possibly their outcomes in their lives will change just because of something we've done. And I agree with you, it's just the most amazing feeling.
And quite often people aren't even aware of the impact that you've had on them. And I'm a big advocate of saying thank you. I think we live in a society where we're very quick to complain, aren't we? Everyone's quick to complain and say, I didn't like that. But how often are we saying thank you? You perhaps bobbed me a little note, or you just lightened my day and that made me think differently. Or sometimes it can just be a phrase, or even just something perhaps on Twitter that someone says something and you go, oh my goodness, I've got it. That's just triggered a thought process. And I'm a real advocate for going out and saying, thank you, you made a difference to me, because quite often people don't realize the difference they make. And when you tell someone that they made a difference to you, then it's amazing. And actually, Andrew is a great advocate of this himself. He has his weekly shout outs when people have contributed or engaged or just been part of his world in a week. And I think it's a great form of communication, that saying thank you, that again makes such a difference. And just thinking about what you were saying about kind of how sometimes it can be these small things that make a difference. I was running some workshops just recently, and kind of my theory is that I certainly wouldn't just leave them to it. I would then go in and keep giving them a little nudge, or keep asking them to think about things differently and putting things into practice and coming back and telling the rest of the group. So we had this great community of learning happening between workshops, which was brilliant. And I was kind of keeping my eye on them all and watching what they were doing over social media and how they were trying to communicate what their business did. And I rang one of the delegates this one day and I said, right, you've just put out a post. I'd love you to change just one word. And then I said, what difference do you think that will make? And she went, oh my goodness. And the change from that one word, the difference was that she had a really successful day compared to a post that up until that point was kind of doing nothing. And she said, I hadn't considered the difference that language could make. And she said now when she kind of proofreads her own social media and marketing materials, she thinks, what would Sarah say? and what's going to trigger my audience? Because you're absolutely right. In terms of communication, people can be so intent at putting their message out that they stop and think, they don't always stop to think, what does my audience want or need, or what do I want my audience to do when they receive this communication? Yeah. And I think that there's some great messages in terms of around how language and understanding can really make a difference to the communication that you're putting out there.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And and I think it was lovely that you did that for someone, because we can think that we know what we're saying, and actually when somebody reflects it back to us, we get a different perspective on that. So good on you for doing that. I think that was a really lovely, caring thing that you did for somebody, because it makes such a difference to them, just pointing out just one word. the everything about what they were trying to communicate, they did more effectively because of it. I think that's great.
And it's essentially what happened to you all those years ago, really, because by actually saying, hang on a minute, change that one word, look what happens.
Yeah,
that you know, she absolutely had a moment where she kind of went, oh, I get it. And obviously we talked through the reasons why that would happen, but it's the same principle, isn't it?
It is. And what's important about that is, as you said there, is thinking about what your audience needs. This is one of my absolute bugbears with people using PowerPoint. The thing I dislike most, and I've got a number of things that I really hate about PowerPoint, but the thing I dislike most, and there will be people listening to this podcast who know that I say this, and that is when the presenter says, oh, you might not be able to see that at the back, or you probably can't see that. And it's, so what was your intention in putting that slide up? What were you thinking, you know? And it's like, no, we can't see that. Thank you for pointing that out, you know.
Because if you know you've got to apologize for it, why on earth are you doing it? Stop and think, if I'm going to apologize for this, stop. What would make it better for my audience right now? It happens, doesn't it?
Oh, all the time. Drives me insane. Absolutely drives me insane. And I've taken, you know, I mean, obviously not in the last year, but before that, I have taken to, if I was going somewhere and someone was doing a PowerPoint, I would tell them that I will be giving them some feedback, you know, but because if nobody does, then people just carry on with that, you know.
So Janet, one of the things that I was really drawn to with this topic was also the ability to use communication within kind of busy organizations, because I think that actually, but there'll be lots of L&D managers out there, won't there, who are trying to work in synergy with the rest of the business. They want to get all their learning initiatives out to everyone that they're trying to help, and there's actually people in the business that can help. So I wanted to share with you an example of kind of where I'd brought this to life and how powerful it can be, really, because I'm hoping that it will help lots of other people out there in the same in the world of L&D that are in the same situation. So last year we went into lockdown. At that time I was working with Ann Summers, and all the Ann Summers field teams had to pivot. Shops had been closed. My communication is so good right now, Janet, that I'm struggling to get my words We do need more wine. Andrew hasn't sent us enough, has he? It's not good enough, Andrew. So we had to do this pivot. So we utilised the skills of virtual learning to create these virtual home parties. So I don't know whether you've been to an Ann Summers home party. I have, and I can absolutely vouch for the fact that Andrew will never have been to one. But yeah, but they would have done them at home, and we turned it into virtual parties. But part of that success was down to the close relations that we had working with other departments at the time. So this was very much aligned with the communications plan, and that was a really great vehicle to talk to all the field teams around what was going on, what was happening, and using that vehicle within the business to really market the learning to the people out there that were on the receiving end of the learning. And I think that was absolutely pivotal in the success of the program. And so I think that within business, we can absolutely be utilizing our allies within the business to help us create that and to help market what we're trying to get out there, because it certainly had a very powerful impact with the work that I did, for sure.
The thing that really struck me about that, and I wrote it down because I didn't want to lose it, was there's something in there about trust. And you talked about partners, and there's a I'll tell you the opposite kind of story. So this
is it going to frighten me, Janet?
No, not at all. No, I'll make you laugh. So when I was working at Selfridges, which was quite a long time ago, and we were up on the 5th floor of that fabulous building in Oxford Street, and the training team were at one end of a corridor, and the what was called personnel were at the other end of the corridor, and there were very heavy fire double doors between them, and you just never went through. You know, the people in personnel were all very boring, and people in training and development were all completely barking mad. That was, you know, the rest of the store knew that, and we never ever talked to each other. And there was something tragic about that, really, because the next job I had, I went to work at a hospital in Chichester, and I was I wasn't the only person doing training, but I was part of the HR team, of the personnel team, delivering management training and personnel training and that sort of stuff to the rest of the organization. And I was part of that team, and it was such a different world. And there's the reason that when I was working at Selfridges, there was this mismatch between what was called personnel and training, was just complete lack of trust between the two senior managers. Now, we got through that because actually there was a graduate recruitment scheme, and it was absolutely vital that both teams at opposite ends of that corridor worked together. And when we worked together, actually we got a house on fire, and they weren't all boring, and we weren't all barking mad, you know, and we had great fun together, and it was collaborative and completely fantastic. But for that to happen, we had to get to a stage where we trusted each other. And your story about Anne Summers, that what struck me there was people working together on a project because they needed to trust each other in order to deliver something for the business. And if people are only looking out for themselves and don't care what else is going on in another part of the business, then everybody fails. So that's what struck me.
I agree, and I think this is where kind of L&D can be, if we can be more aligned with the business outcomes and understand the common purpose that we're all trying to get to. I loved what you said about trust there, because actually what I've written down is transparency, and that transparency creates that trust. And then if you put the business outcomes at the kind of the top of what we're trying to achieve here, and everyone works together towards that with great communication and using all the tools that we've got to make sure that our audience absolutely know what either they need to do or what this will do for them and what the next steps are, then that's quite a powerful combination, isn't it?
It can be incredibly powerful. Yeah, it can transform what an organization is achieving. If people are all aligned and understand what they're trying to achieve together, understand what their role is within trying to achieve that, and are willing to be transparent and communicate effectively and authentically with each other, they can do amazing things, absolutely amazing things, including, like, you know, last year, there will have been so many examples of exactly what you were talking
Definitely.
about, where organizations had to pick up the baton and run with it, and had to do it together because they couldn't have teams working in isolation. It just wasn't going to work.
It's almost like I love the story you told about that corridor. I can see a quite a bleak looking corridor in front of me with these great big double doors. It's almost like somebody opened the double doors and pushed the two departments together to say, you've got to have a conversation about this. And I think that was quite a powerful moment. But I think what underpins all of this is relationships and the communication that you're having between relationships. And what I'd love to know from you is, what do you think that what challenges have we got out there in business with our lines of communication? And I suppose what I mean by that is by some of the vehicles that we use to communicate. You know, are we getting too reliant on emails and electronic communication instead of perhaps sometimes having the conversation to get to know somebody and understand each other?
I think there's definitely a large amount of that. I think one of the things that I really, really struggle with is just the noise. There's just so much noise. And it's back to what we were talking about right at the start, and that's people's intention. What is it they're trying to do? You get just so much stuff that it's overwhelming. And, you know, yes, for goodness sake, pick up the phone and speak to someone rather than send an email. Stop being so self-protected.
Yeah.
I can understand, you know, it's International Women's Day. I can understand how some women may feel that they have to send stuff through email in order to be able to prove their position. It's just tragic, isn't it? It's utter tragedy that that might happen. So there we are. I shoehorned in International Women's Day.
I liked it. Nothing like a good shoehorn, Janet. I liked it.
Absolutely.
I just wonder, that's interesting what you say about how women are perhaps using different vehicles of communication because they feel they ought to. Do you think that's women to women, women to men? How do you think that's manifesting in the business environment?
Oh, now there's a question, and I could give a very generalized answer, and that would be on no basis whatsoever other than my gut feeling. So I'd rather not do that, but I suspect that there are some women in different organizations in different situations who are having to communicate in very specific ways because they sense, whether it's real or not, they sense that if they aren't communicating in those ways, then they won't be taken seriously, or they may get manipulated in some ways. And that's just, we've got to break through that. That's just appalling, isn't it? It's back to trust and transparency.
Yeah, and starting to create really safe environments in the workplace that we can all have an open, honest conversation that's really transparent and develops trust inside organizations.
And we've got to start with young people there. I'm working with a local sixth form, and I'm having email conversations with young girls, 16, 17, 18, who are really struggling at the moment. And they want to have that conversation via email because they feel intimidated by having a chat over the phone with a stranger. And, you know, gosh, if at 17, you don't feel that you can talk to somebody over the phone who's there to help you, then what's that going to be like when they get to the workplace?
Yeah, I agree. And actually, these are skills that people do need to have in the workplace. So you're absolutely right, Janet. We do need to be looking at the youth of today to make sure that these skills are transferred into their work life. We've been told here that we haven't got much time left. So what I would like to do in the nicest possible of ways, but what I would like to say is that I am fairly sure that we are going to continue this conversation, Janet, because I think we have common passions here. Just to shoehorn another passion in there. I know it's not what you said, Andrew. Andrew is saying that is not what I said, Sarah, behind the scenes. But, you know, we're just having a giggle here. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And I can't wait to continue this conversation. But also, as a shout out, a big thank you to Andrew Jacobs for bringing Women Talking About Learning, introducing women together to talk to each other about learning, because it's been an absolute pleasure here from me.
Absolutely, I've loved it. The time has completely flown by. I don't know where that's gone. It's been great meeting you, and I'm pretty certain at some point soon we will have that glass of wine together.
Definitely. The question is, are we going to invite Andrew?
Oh, I think it would be mean not to.
I think so too. Janet, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You might have noticed that Sarah made a couple of comments about me being in the room. It was really necessary this week because of the sound issues we had. I was fascinated with how Sarah and Janet, two women who hadn't ever really connected before, came together and worked through a deep and broad topic with such verve and informed conversation. We thank them for their contributions, and just to remind them and you, we don't buy wine for guests. When this is all over though, I'd love to be able to meet up with as many guests as possible to celebrate women talking about learning. If you'd like to be a guest, we're recording a few more episodes in the next few weeks. The list of topics is on the website, and you can find all the details in the show notes. Once again, Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon. You have been listening to the Women Talking About Learning podcast. Women Talking About Learning is available on all podcast platforms, including Apple and Google Podcasts. You'll also find us on Spotify, Amazon Music, and other music streaming services. Make sure to like and subscribe. It helps more people find us. You can find out more about Women Talking About Learning via our website, womentalkingaboutlearning.com. Make sure you tune in next time for more women talking about learning, for more of the signal and none of the noise.